Welcome everybody to this webinar on dealing with mixed levels in the English classroom. I'm sure this is something we're all familiar with as EFL teachers. And in this webinar, we're going to look at strategies on how to overcome some of the difficulties with my colleague Heba, who is the latest addition to the academic team here at MLA. Heba was the Director of Studies at King's College last summer. So if you were in King's, you should recognise Heba from last year. So without further ado, let's get started with the webinar. As always, you will receive a certificate of participation in the next couple of days. If you don't receive it, email us at formazione@mlaworld.com. The handout does include important information from the webinar plus useful extra links. Okay, so to introduce dealing with mixed levels in the classroom. As I said at the outset, this is very tricky for teachers to try and navigate and to try and decide what types of activities is best or are best for the students to use. And also as well, you can have a difference in proficiency within the level. So you can have a class of B1 students, but some will be closer to a B2. Some may have just progressed from A2. So there's also like the discrepancies within the same level that we have to be aware of. So catering for all students is super important in this aspect. And some ways teachers do this are by using tiered activities, varying the materials that we use, and scaffolding some tasks. If there's anything that you do, please mention it into the chat and let us know. And also something that we need to be aware of, as always, is classroom management. And there are a few extra specific things we need to be aware of with regards to mixed level classes in relation to classroom management. And we'll go through a couple of those towards the end of the webinar. So hopefully by the end of the session, you'll be able to understand the importance of addressing mixed ability classes in different ways by using an array of strategies to ensure that learning of all abilities in the class is maximized, and we can navigate the diverse learning needs of all students in an appropriate way. Here's a nice little diagram that shows how treating all students equally could possibly pose a problem. If you can see why this would be a problem in this instance, let us know in the chat. But here you have the instructor asking everybody to climb the tree with a various array of animals which may struggle, I would think. So first of all, understanding mixed ability classrooms. This is often relates to having the debate between equality and equity, which is why the photo or the picture was shown on the previous slide. So the two different approaches. Equality is treating individuals in the same way, despite possible differences, learning differences. Equity is treating individuals to their needs and taking into consideration those differences. You may have some learners who are more kinesthetic learners, some visual learners, and you would tailor the lesson, the activities to these types of learners. Whereas with equality, you would do the same type of activity, tasks for every student in the class. So there's quite an obvious distinction between the two. In EFL, it's often framed between in EFL, it's often framed as using differentiated or inclusive instruction. If you've come across these terms before, again, let us know in the chat. In this webinar specifically, we're going to look at differentiated instruction. We could potentially look at inclusive instruction in webinars in the future. give us feedback if you've enjoyed this webinar, and then we can definitely look to develop a webinar on inclusive instruction, most definitely. At this point, I will hand over to Heba, and she will go through differentiated instruction. So Heba, over to you.
Hello, how are you? How is everybody? So the question is in the beginning, who needs differentiated instruction? There are many different reasons. It's not just usually people perceive that it's different reading levels or different academic levels, but it isn't usually that, usually only that. So you can have kids at different reading levels. You can have different cognition levels. Cognition is basically the understanding. You can have kids with different preferred output. So sometimes you'll have a child who has dyslexia or a child who has ADHD who struggles to read, to write. And so if you ask them to showcase their information that they know or to showcase their learning by writing, then you won't actually see the true level of where they're at or what they know. I'll talk more about that in detail in a bit. You have different intelligences and different interests. Could we go on to?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So when people hear differentiated instruction, they usually say, sorry, they usually think of grouping students based on their levels or teaching the weaker students. But that's not actually what differentiated instruction is or what effective differentiated instruction is. With differentiated instruction, we group kids based on their skills, their interest, their readiness to learn, or by choice. And it's very important that this differentiated instruction is what we call fluid. This grouping is what we call fluid. So for example, you can start a lesson where the kids are grouped based on their levels. Kids with the same level are together, for example, and you'd explain it, and then you'd sit with the weaker students a bit and work with them. And then during output, maybe you'd shift the groups again. Like for example, if you're giving a piece of descriptive writing, and you have a bunch of kids who are really interested in soccer and another bunch of kids who are interested in pop music, and you're doing a piece of descriptive writing. So your target here is to make them reach the lesson objective, which is, for example, using adjectives and adverbs and descriptive phrases. And so if you don't ask them all to do the same thing, you will get a much better output. This is a kind of grouping that we do. There are many other types of grouping. If you guys could suggest them in the chat, that would be great. Types of grouping that you've used. Something that I used to use in class, which really helped, is if you group kids based on level, then they know that, oh my God, we're the weak kids, and that's why you're putting us together, or we're the smarter kids. But what I used to do is I used to group them after the first few weeks of the year, and I get to know my kids. Then you'd group them in groups with different names. Like you'd call the same level groups, for example, names of colors, or you'd call the groups who are you divided them based on their interests. You'd call them, for example, Harry Potter houses, like Gryffindor and Slytherin and things like that. You could have another type of grouping that in your head is for a specific reason, or by your justification is a specific reason, but you'd call them by the names of soccer teams, for example. And so you'd say, okay, class, we're going to start today. Everyone get in their color groups. And so they get in their color groups. And then a bit further on in the class, you want to switch the groups around a bit. So you want the stronger kids with the weaker kids. And these kids know what each group is. So for example, if you say, okay, now I need you to get into your soccer team groups. So they know that these are soccer team groups. Because there are so many different types of groups, they don't correlate that, oh, we're in this group because we're weak kids, or we're in this group because we're strong kids. Purposeful use of flexible grouping. This is what I was talking about a minute ago. Teaching up and holding students to high standards. We don't only differentiate for the weaker students. A long time ago, we used to ask the smarter students or the kids who are better academically, when they're finished their task, how about I buddy you up with someone who needs help, or you can be the teacher's assistant and you can help them. But you're actually not being fair to that student because they're not learning in your class. So what you need to do in differentiation is you need to make sure that everybody is learning up from where they're at. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Keeps happening. Okay, so Heber's gone over briefly what differentiated instruction is and what it is not. Some of the activities that we can do include tiered activities, varied materials, and scaffolding. Some of these terms you may already be aware of, but we're going to look at those a little bit now and in a little bit more detail later on. So tiered activities is when we give the students a task which is multi-layered, and it allows flexible grouping as Heber was just talking about. And then the students can assign each other roles in the group, which allows for the progressive development within the elements of the activity. So the the students would group each other, assign roles, and then each go through their specific role within the task, and then you can layer the task into getting progressively more difficult to expand their understanding. And then the students can assist each other if they are struggling, which is why flexible grouping is important in these tiered activities. Varied material, again, Heber just briefly touched upon it. You may have a class where football or soccer is preferred, pop music, fashion, TV series, things like this. So getting to know your students is super important, and then you can give them materials based on their interests. So it kind of gets the buy-in from the students. Like if they're selecting the kind of the content or the topic, then they will probably be more motivated to do the learning. Um, and and yeah, like I said, like yeah, if they're using elements or aspects of things that they're interested in, they'll just probably be more oh, sorry, probably be more engaged in the activity. And then scaffolding, I'm sure everybody is aware. This allows the teacher to introduce new concepts in phases using different methods, which can help the students recollect previously learned aspects of language, activating schema, and again, kind of like tiered activities, introducing things kind of incrementally, not overwhelming the students, to ensure that they understand, and then we can expand or extend their knowledge as we go through the task. Heber, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So when we talk about tiered content, let's say, for example, we're teaching kids in English the main idea. If you have kids who are reading at different levels, so what's my objective? My objective here is teaching them how to find the main idea in a piece of text. And then you give each child the same text at differentiated levels. And I'm going to show you in a minute where you can get a lot of these things online. There's so many pre-prepared materials that you can go and you can take the same piece of text with the same questions and get them leveled. So this is what we call tiered content. This is for English. For math, you can do it in another way where if you're doing multiplication, for example, some kids would be doing it with single digits, some would be doing it with double digits, some would be doing it with more complex digits, but it's basically where you take the lesson objective and because you know your kids, we do formative assessments all the time. This is very important as a teacher to know exactly where your kids are at. Sometimes formative assessments can be something so simple, and technology makes this very easy for us, as putting a small quiz on Google Classroom, if you use Google Classroom or any other LMS, and you put a small quiz a few days before the exam, and kids just have to answer it, and then you know where everyone's at. And this way, when you go into your lesson, everybody's working at the level that they need to be working. And just something I'd like to add here, differentiation takes a lot of prep work, but it makes the flow of your lesson so much easier for you and for the kids, and you achieve much higher results at the end of the year. So even though a lot of these things I'm talking about may seem like they're a lot of work, but it really pays out in the end. Okay, so examples of online tiered material, and you'll find these in the handout too. So something like News MLA, News ELA, sorry, This gives you write in, and there's a free version and a paid version. I've always used the free version. It's wonderful. And it gives you the same, you pick the objective and it gives you the text at different levels. Even the questions are at different reading levels, but they all test the same objective. There's a Tween Tribune by the Smithsonian that's also really interesting. I'm sure most of you know what Khan Academy is. Khan Academy, I know a lot of adults who use it too to understand concepts. IXL is most famous for math, but it actually has a lot of subjects on it. And all these the others, you'll find them in the handout. Okay, jigsaw activities. This is a type of differentiation where kids actually, you flip the classroom. So you're not, it no longer becomes a teacher-centered classroom. So for example, if you're teaching kids about parts of a sentence like nouns, verbs, adjectives, what you can do is you can assign each group something and you will say, okay, you guys are going to use the first 20 minutes of the lesson to research this and find out as much as you can about it and come together in a way that you can explain it. So each group, a group is doing nouns, for example, a group is doing verbs, a group is doing adjectives. And then after a certain time is finished, then you take one person from each group and you put them together. So now each group has someone who is a professional. We say professional, someone who understands what nouns are, someone else who understands what verbs are, and so on and so forth, and they explain it to each other. And this way they take control, or they take control of the class in a way that makes them much more engaged. And by explaining the concept to other people, they understand it more and it's more deeply ingrained.
Perfect. Christina, just to answer your question in the chat, the slides, we don't share the individual slides, but there is a handout which will be sent to you in the next few days. If you don't receive the handout, the email address is at the bottom of the page, formazione@mlaworld.com. Moving on to the next slide.
Okay, so providing a variety of materials. So different kids learn in different ways. What we do again is before we plan any lesson, we decide what is the objective of this lesson. As a former English teacher, I'm going to talk about it from an English perspective, but you can do this in any subject. So you get to know what your students' interest is, like I was talking about before, like for the descriptive writing, or you get to know their intelligence type. So some kids have to learn by moving, some kids learn by watching videos. And you have them learn it that way. I think it's easier if I give you an example. So when I used to teach Macbeth, the kids really hated Shakespeare because they said it was very boring. And so what I did is, yeah, and so what I did is I divided the class into several groups and I assigned them each an act. An act is like a chapter. And then I said, okay, this group, you guys are going to read it, understand it, and turn it into a comic strip. So the kids that like to draw and are more visual, they were very comfortable with that. Another group, I told them to do the same thing and pull out the main ideas and turn it into a rap song. And a third group had to act it out as a modern text. And these are the kids that actually had to move around. And by the end of the year, they all scored A's because they were able to learn the same material in a different way, in their preferred way.
Perfect.
Okay, so scaffolding. Scaffolding is basically helping the students to achieve the target by supporting them on the side. So for example, if you're teaching something, then you give them graphic organizers, maybe something that explains the vocabulary. Maybe if you're teaching something, you give them a video to watch beforehand that helps explain it. My only comment on scaffolding, scaffolding is basically helping the kids. My only comment on scaffolding is that if you are going to help the kids give them assistive, not technologies, things to assist them during the year, then you have two options. You have to either give them the same assistance during the exam, or you have to wean them off it. So it's like if you have a child who finds it difficult to walk, and you give them a walking cane, and then you come at the end of the year and you take the walking cane from them and you tell them, run and I will test you and grade you. So that's not really fair. But if I have a child, for example, who has dyslexia again, or ADHD, or some kind of difficulty in writing, and I allow them to type during class, then I also have to give them that during the assessment. Or I need to train them. I can start them off with it and then train them till the end of the year to work without it so that it's fair. Oh, there you go. Examples of scaffolding content. So before teaching, we share videos of content to be taught. We share vocabulary, assign online games. The internet is a massive resource. And if you don't know how to do something, you can go onto ChatGPT or any kind of AI and say, I need scaffolding, or I need something for this, and you can actually input the chat GPT this year allows you to add attachments. You can actually attach your lesson plan and tell him, give me examples of scaffolding or how to do this, and it's amazing. It's an assistant, it's a tool, makes your life easier. So while teaching, you can use graphic organizers or assistive technology like speech to text or text to speech. And after teaching, you can reteach things in smaller sizes, or there are so many websites now with games that are related to the topics that we teach. And for ESL or for EAL, one of my favorite websites to use is called Learning Village, and the kids play games that are so much fun, but they're actually recapping on what you've been teaching them, and it's from grade 1 all the way up to grade 12.
Just to bring this back to like in an MLA context, we generally at our centers will have scaffolding at the beginning of teaching. You would kind of model the task, or as Heather said, show videos with the kind of lesson contents at the beginning of the lesson, just to kind of prime the students to make them more aware of the task that is to come and the type of learning they will be expected to do. So yeah, definitely all of these are fantastic. In the MLA context, generally we would use before teaching, but that's not to say that we can't use scaffolding during teaching or even in the post task phase.
Okay, and choice boards. So when you teach children a concept and you want them to show that they've learned it, one of the best ways to do it is give them a choice. Would you like to write an essay about it? Would you like to talk about it? There are many things in this slide that you can choose. There are also other things. I found that children generally, we're all different, we're all unique, and if you ask all the kids to write or to output in the same way, you will definitely be assessing more the ability of that child to do that output, not actually assessing their content knowledge. If you want to assess their content knowledge, you give them a choice. Just a word of caution here is to make sure that the child does not use, or the student does not use the same method of output every time. They can use a preferred method, but we also, as teachers, we need to push them out of their comfort zone a bit, because that's what life is like when they go to university. So to train them, but to also allow them to use things that are comfortable for them. Okay, learning centers. Um, this is basically just like a recap of what I was talking about before. Like if kids are working, for example, on descriptive writing, and a bunch of kids are describing a soccer picture, or another bunch of kids are describing something else, then the teacher can divide or move the desks into different learning centers and put, for example, a task on each center, and the kids can work on that, or they can you say like this group go here, this group go there. You could do it in another way where they shift around. So this is an example of learning centers.
Cool, perfect. Thank you, Heather. So we've looked at some various strategies on differentiated instruction and why they're important in the classroom. Alongside that, obviously, classroom management is always important. But as I mentioned at the beginning, there are some extra things we need to be aware of during a class with mixed abilities. So as well as continuing to do best practices, okay, so setting expectations from the students, but then also of yourself as the teacher, and encouraging collaboration. There are a few other things that we can do as teachers in EFL. So the two we're going to look at briefly are as follows: balancing attention and providing individual support. So these do kind of work together, to be honest. Oh, excuse me. There we go. Sorry. So yeah, balancing attention. As Heather said, like in the beginning, when we have a differentiated ability, when we have different abilities in the class, our temptation is to go to like the weaker students and spend a little bit more time with the weaker students in the class and neglect the stronger students. This is something we need to try and avoid. We need to balance balance the attention we give to to each student individually in an equal way. Because it's only fair as teachers, we want each student to progress as much as they can. If we're only focusing on the weaker students to lift them up to the same level, the stronger students are not going to progress to the next level if we're looking at the CEFR categories. So making sure that the attention that you give is balanced, it is equal, and it is fair is very important. And then within that, I guess providing individual support. So individual students have individual needs, which need to be addressed. This could be, as we've seen, in terms of the activities that they do, the grouping of the students. They may have some extra educational needs which need to be bore in mind, and doing activities and tasks that that students like want to do, but also that they need to do as well. Okay, you may have students that are very keen kinesthetic learners, but there is a time and place for those types of activities. We can't just give the students what they want all of the time. And when they're doing a task which they may not enjoy as much as others, that's when we need to provide that individual support on a regular basis with all students in an equal and fair way, so no student is neglected. Heba, you're on mute, Heba.
Yeah,
There you
just
go.
noticed. Okay, so how to make the environment inclusive. It's very important to teach your students from the beginning that everyone is different and everyone's needs are different. So some kids, I know that in a lot of schools in the States, they now have standing desks. I don't know if that's available in Italy or not, but some kids can work better while they're standing. Some kids can work better while they're moving around. I found that if I have kids who like to fidget a lot or who understand better when moving, then I would seat them at the back of the class so that they're not distracting for other students, but I would also allow them to move. It used to be the old school is that everybody needs to sit quietly, everybody needs to look at the teacher, everybody needs to focus. What I've learned is that some kids focus better when they're sitting and drawing in a notebook and they can hear you. Some kids focus better if they're doodling. Some kids will focus better if they're standing or fidgeting. And if you understand, again, the key here is to get to know your students very well at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the course. And when you do that, then you will have all of their engagement. And this is very important. Change the seating often, make your grouping fluid and flexible. We talked about this. Allow sound canceling headphones. So I always have my teachers have in their class a couple of noise canceling headphones, not ones that are linked to music or anything. They're just noise canceling headphones. And when the kids start to work on a task, some kids really can't focus by any small noises. I'm sure some of us are like that too. If you're talking and someone moves or someone's doing a clicking sound or a pen sound, it's very distracting. So they know to go and take it from the corner and they put it on so that they can focus. Develop routines and practices. This is also very important that kids thrive in routine. So writing on the board, if you have a whiteboard, writing on the board before the kids come in, do nows and objectives and to-dos. The kids will come in and automatically know, for example, this is what we're going to do right now until the teacher gets ready or until everyone's there. Having these little routines and procedures really helps. Provide materials that select a variety of cultures and home settings. Most of our classrooms now are extremely diverse and have students from all across the world. It's very important to include everybody, make sure everybody feels at home, feels heard, or feels seen.
Exactly. So, as mentioned at the beginning as well, this is how to make the environment inclusive. If anybody wants, please give us feedback and we will look at doing an inclusive instruction webinar as well. But most definitely, making every student feel welcome in the classroom and, like Heather said, seen and acknowledged is super, super important. Heather?
Okay, where do you start? Someone you might listen to what I'm saying today and say, "Oh my God, I can't do all that." And if you start too many new things all at once, it's going to be very difficult. So what I would suggest you do, sorry, is take a lesson that you're comfortable with, a unit or a chapter that you're comfortable with. Pick one type of differentiation and practice it. Practice that type of differentiation, for example, the flexible grouping, and do it again and again and again until it becomes second nature. And then you're comfortable with it, and then add another type of differentiation. Learning to create a differentiated classroom is a journey, and nobody gets it from the first time. Do it once and twice and three times. You're comfortable with it, move on to the next one. And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Perfect. So to conclude, we have seen um, ways to address disparities in proficiency level or abilities or educational needs in the classroom, varying the types of activities, scaffolding, changing groups, like flexible grouping, and things like this. Um, we've given you links and websites that resources that you can use to kind of help with this. Advised just now from Heather as starting small, practice practice the same differentiation technique over and over again until you feel comfortable. This is a process. Okay, it takes time. Um, and then move on. So we can have our own self-development as well whilst addressing the different needs of the students in the classroom. And also we looked briefly at some classroom management strategies to help promote a conducive learning environment, ensuring that teachers are balancing the attention between individual groups of students and individual students within the differentiated instruction techniques.
Could I add something here,
Of
Luke?
course. Yeah, of course.
I've been teaching for many, many, many years, and I had a lot of classes whom people labeled as difficult behavior-wise. But I found that if you differentiate for the kids, a lot of kids who act up or who have what we call bad behavior, it's because they're not able to access the curriculum, or they're not learning, or they don't feel engaged, but once you differentiate and they're learning, and they're able to move if they need to move and all of that stuff, the behavior issues become minimal. And it really, really makes a world of difference.
Cool. As always, we have many ideas for future webinars, but we do welcome your ideas as well. So email us, drop them into the chat, and we will see if we are able to do any new webinars, webinar topics. Sorry. And once again, thank you for your attention on this Thursday evening. As mentioned earlier, you'll receive a certificate of participation by email. If you do not receive it, contact formazione@mlaworld.com. If you want to watch any of this webinar again, you can go on to MLA World's YouTube channel where all of our webinars are posted. So this webinar will be posted in a few days, I imagine, and all of our back catalog, sorry, of previous webinars. there'll be a handout containing all the information, slides, links, resources with relation to this webinar. The next webinar next week, March the 30th, will be on teaching a language, monitoring and assessing. So monitoring and assessing. Hope you will join us all again for that one. Once again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, Heather, for joining me this evening. And we'll see everybody again very, very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.